Good morning, everybody. We're so happy to see you again. Many of you we're happy to see for the second time here. We call this the deeper dive on Cliff, the Cliff Tool, New Mexico. I'm really excited to welcome everyone who's here, especially those who attended our first meeting about a month ago, where we had an hour-long presentation from several of the people who are here with us today. And today we're going to do our deeper dive. We'll spend a little bit more time looking behind the scenes, looking at the dashboard of the Cliff tool. My name is Adrienne Smith. I'm with the New Mexico Caregivers Coalition here in New Mexico. We're a statewide organization. We started in 2009. We advocate for and train family caregivers and also paid professional caregivers. There are, just parenthetically, about 62,000 paid professional caregivers in New Mexico in our small, just over 2 million. And we've got another 487,000 family caregivers who are unpaid, working as family caregivers at any time, at any moment. And our work is all about better jobs for those who are in the workforce and better access to resources, referrals, and training tools so that caregivers can better serve people who are elderly and those with disabilities. I'll start, first of all, with turning this over to my partner in crime here, Dana Howarth, Program Director. Dana, could you say a few words?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. As Adrienne mentioned, I'm Dana Howarth. I'm the Program Director for the New Mexico Caregivers Coalition. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention some Zoom etiquette for those that maybe have not been on a Zoom webinar previously. So for this webinar, we're going to use the Q&A function for questions. So at any time during today's presentation, you can submit questions using the Q&A function. The Q&A box should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you have anything outside of specific questions, you're welcome to have conversation in the chat during today's presentation. If anyone has any questions, like I said, please use the Q&A, and I hope everyone enjoys today's presentation.
Thank you, Dana. Before I go over the agenda, I want to introduce you to the people you're going to be spending the most time with here today. Alex Reuter. Alex Reuter, who you see there on screen, is with the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. And Carla Davis, who you're also seeing here on screen, she's with Goodwill Industries of Tulsa. Stephen Shepelwich is with the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. And Stephen McCall is with PHI, a national nonprofit headquartered in the Bronx that advocates and does research for caregivers nationally. And with that, I'm going to just give you a short little view here of our agenda. In our next topic here, we'll go right into a presentation of a behind the scenes, the dashboard, with Alex Reuter leading us through this charting a course to self-sufficiency. And he'll have up to or close to an hour, however much of that time that you'd like to take, Alex, please, we want you to do that. We do ask that attendees just put your questions in the Q&A box if you would. And our plan is to answer all of those at the end. After Alex talks, we'll hear from Steve Shepelwich and Carla Davis. And Steve is leading this effort at a district level with several states in the Kansas City district, but he works nationally across all systems among the Federal Reserve Bank. So even though Carla Davis is a neighbor of his, he's working here with us in New Mexico. He works with Alex in Atlanta and all the other states too. So we'll hear from Steve kind of a high level of how they're using it in Oklahoma, and also from Carla about how they're using it in Oklahoma. Following that, we'll hear from Stephen McCall for how Cliff can be useful at the state and local level. And then I'll close with just where do we go from here, and how fast can we make this work in New Mexico? in a way that works for all of us who are on the call and all of us who want to participate in this great tool. I will stop sharing my screen. And now we'll just move directly to Alex. Thank you, Alex.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Ruder. I'm with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk about the CLIF dashboard and particularly some of the opportunities that we'll have to bring this tool to New Mexico for use. So what my plan is today for this hour is I'm going to go through initially a few slides to just kind of, for those of you that were on the initial call, this may be a little bit of a review. But for those that are new to this work, this is going to provide a little bit of the framework for how the CLIF tool can help understand the impact of benefits cliffs and career advancement, particularly in New Mexico. Then I'm going to do a demonstration of the tool live, and we're just going to go through that very closely. It's going to be very detailed, and you'll see how the tool works and then how it produces results. And so again, it's great to be here today. So just a moment as I share my screen. All right, everyone. As I said, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to really talk about three topics. I'm going to talk about benefits cliffs, I'm going to talk about self-sufficiency, and I'm going to talk about workforce development, particularly how they're all interact with each other. And that's what creates the financial barriers to career advancement. But at the same time, that's what creates the opportunity to see how organizations like that everyone on the phone today can mitigate financial barriers to career advancement. So I want to start out really quick on self-sufficiency, because we didn't spend as much time on self-sufficiency in the previous call, but it is an important part of the CLIF dashboard. So I think it's going to be helpful if we think about self-sufficiency as something like a living wage, right? How much money do you have to earn locally to cover your basic expenses without the need for public assistance? Right? So how much do you have to earn through your job to be able to cover key items like housing, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare, miscellaneous expenses, right? A living wage. We call it self-sufficiency. Some of you may also maybe work with the United Way and have heard of terms such as ALICE, very similar. And in fact, some of our tools do use the ALICE data, right? And you can include that right away. But what I want to start out in is talking about why I think self-sufficiency is important, and that's why, and provide the justification for why you're going to see that in the tool. So to begin, I'd like to start out with this new report from the National Governors Association, the State Roadmap for Workforce Recovery. This framework has 4 points for post-COVID recovery for states. Why I like this is that I'm going to just go through these 4 points really quick. The first 3, I'm going to argue, are very core to workforce development, whereas the fourth is somewhat new. So let's go through these points really quick. So number 1, we have expand access to essential support services. Right. So what are some supportive services that we need to provide to workers so they can move up a career pathway or move into in-demand jobs? 2, readily connect job seekers to work. Right. So this is core workforce development, moving workers into jobs as quickly as possible, into training and jobs. Number 3, advanced digital access and skills development. I mean, in the post-COVID world, of course, like skills development through online training, online employment even is a larger and larger component of the work. But what I think is a new and emerging trend in job training and workforce development that I'm sure many of you are involved with locally is enhanced job quality. So what that means is we're now starting to think about jobs along different metrics, right? We're thinking about career growth. We're thinking about the benefits the job offers. We're thinking about the wages over time and what are those wages. So again, just to recap, the reason I want to show you this today is that this job quality component that's an increasingly common part of workforce development ties into this self-sufficiency measure. Okay? So what do we mean about quality job? And so I think this is a useful chart from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT Good Jobs Institute. And if you look on the left and the right, what it does is divide a quality job under two dimensions. On the left, you have what they call higher ends. Is the job meaningful? Does it lead to personal growth, belonging, achievement, recognition? Whereas on the right, we have these more traditional components of what we may think of as a quality job. Pay and benefits, schedules, career path, security, and safety. So what I'm going to suggest to everyone today is that some of these dimensions on the right side of your screen, pay, schedules, career path, security, and safety, are getting into this idea of self-sufficiency, right? Is that pay enough to allow someone to be secure and safe financially, right? Are they able to cover their basic expenses as a measure of a quality job? The National Fund for Workforce Solutions is another a very prominent national organization that's working on job quality. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail, but you can just see that they define job quality in terms of core issues such as compensation, support such as training, opportunity such as career development, and then do the workers have voice? Again, you can see on the core and the support side of this framework that compensation, getting to a point of a sustainable pay, that's what it says in this framework, is an important piece of information. Okay, so what can be done, and why do we include this idea in the tool you're about to see, in addition to the benefits clips, which is the second core component of the tool? The National Governors Association report lists in a collection of best practices the Alabama David tool, which is what I'm going to show you today. So as an example of including job quality in workforce development, they cite the Alabama David tool and its self-sufficiency focus. So what that means is that the Alabama David tool, and then our CLIF tool users and partners around the country, are using the tool to understand what jobs are moving workers toward this idea of self-sufficiency. So it's not necessarily just employment. It's not necessarily just, did you get a job after you completed training? It's, are you on a career path that's going to move to some measure of what we locally decide is a valid benchmark for success? And that's, in Alabama, that's the self-sufficiency focus of this tool. And that's what we're going to be going. Self-sufficiency, in addition, is not a something that's just coming up through communities, or it's just talked about by a few select groups. Right? It's actually in the major federal workforce development legislation that's in both the human services field and the workforce development field. And so what you see on your screen here is just text I pulled from two major public laws: the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, that's a federal program, or excuse me, a federal law that governs really the entire federal workforce development system. And it says, quote, "The goals of this legislation and this law are to improve the quality of the workforce, reduce welfare dependency, and then my emphasis, increase economic self-sufficiency." Right, so workforce development as a goal is moving workers towards this idea of self-sufficiency. And then second, temporary assistance for needy families, TANF program, which many of you are probably familiar with. TANF, if you look at text from the Administration for Children and Families, it says the TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, provides states and territories with flexibility in operating programs designed to help low-income families with children achieve economic self-sufficiency. So again, I just wanted to spend a few minutes to emphasize the importance of this idea of self-sufficiency in the tool, right? And why we have included it, so our partners can begin to say, well, I'm working within the workforce system. I work with TANF clients, for example. I want to know what jobs locally can get to a measure like self-sufficiency. So that's why this measure is going to be included. Now, the tools we have to work with partners in New Mexico, there's a few of them. We're going to spend our time today really focused on the dashboard. But since this is a behind the scenes look, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the full scope of the project. Starting out on the left side of your screen, what powers the tools are really two categories of work. The first is the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta Policy Rules Database. That's a collection of all states, of all major federal programs and tax policies. So it's that collection of social safety net rules and taxes, so the earned income tax credit, housing, childcare, food, healthcare programs, that allows us to understand the intersection of career growth in your area and public assistance and tax policy. Right, so to identify and benefits cliffs, we need that policy rules database. And for any researchers on the call, that policy rules database is available for your use if you would want to see the policy rules database. Second piece on the left side of your screen is the CLIF tool, Career Ladder Identifier and Financial Forecasting. And this is where our partnership with the Atlanta Fed, with Steve and the Kansas City Fed, with Carla at Goodwill, we're working on the CLIF tool, right? And really doing the best we can to make that CLIF tool useful for our partners. Now, the CLIF tool has a few key purposes, and that's on the right side of your screen. And so we use the CLIF tool for first, community, state, and federal policy solutions. So we use it to model changes, proposed changes to either your programs or policy, federal or state, to see how that might improve the economic trajectory of workers. For example, we work with a nonprofit group in the state of Florida who is providing funds to phase out the child care subsidy, so there's no child care cliff. And we've modeled that program directly into the tool. So counselors and policymakers can look right at the tool and see the effect of this program. Number two, career and financial coaching. Many of our partners use both the dashboard and the planner, which is another tool I'll talk about in just a moment, for actual coaching. So you're sitting down one-on-one with families or workers, you want to really go into depth with them about their financial and career path. You can use our tools for those purposes as well. And we have a number of partnerships focused on those activities. Three, employer solutions. Right? I think we all recognize that employers are a key partner in this work. Employers know career paths. Employers have a good sense of the demands of their given jobs, and what exactly could be someone's path from entry level to a more advanced position. And we're very excited about working with employers to really understand barriers they may face for recruitment and retention of talent. So we're actually also working on a version of the CLIF dashboard that's geared toward employers for their specific use cases. We also have these tools also empower a couple other activities, guaranteed income pilots, if any of you are engaged with the guaranteed income work, and then just core research about the social safety net. So all of these activities and the tools you're going to see today come from this policy rules database and the CLIF technology. And I want to say a few words about the CLIF technology. So you may, again, be wondering, well, why does the Federal Reserve create something like CLIF for our partners? It really goes back to our mission, our community and economic development mission at the Federal Reserve. And in particular, our director of research a few years ago had a mission, and his mission was that the financial planning resources available to the highest wealth families in the country are available to all families. So the CLIF technology is really a re-engineered tool that was built for the private sector for financial planning for high wealth families. And we took that structure and created a tool that's available for all families. So that's the story of CLIF, and a brief explanation of why the Federal Reserve is providing this tool. All right. All right. Now, the two tools that we can provide, and I really think this is important because what tool makes sense depends on the organization. Right? We have partners that use the CLIF dashboard, which is what you see on the right side of your screen, and the CLIF planner, which is what you see on the right side of your screen. Excuse me, the dashboard on the left, the planner on the right. The easiest way to think about this could be to say that the dashboard is kind of like a Tableau or an Excel. It's meant to be very easy to use, drop-down lists, Ideal for situations in which you need to just get results quite quickly at a very high level. The Cliff Planner, I like to say, is more of a TurboTax, right? So it's more of a, if you're sitting down with a family, you want customized results, you want to be able to put in custom wages or build a custom career path, you'd want to use that Cliff Planner, right? It's a much more individualized tool, but the trade-off is it takes more time. Right, so it really depends on where you are as an organization and how you have a workflow with clients or with your stakeholders. Okay, Cliff Dashboard on your left, and that's what we're going to focus on today. Ideal for policymakers, businesses, funders, and other stakeholders. Right, because it's meant to be easy to use, because you can just pull it up, come up with some major case studies in your area. You can provide very compelling stories to your stakeholders very quickly. Number 2, career coaches. Career coaches also use the Cliff Dashboard for what I call light touch career coaching. We actually just finished a third-party evaluation of using the Cliff Dashboard with families and learned a lot of really interesting results from using that dashboard to tell families about career choice, self-sufficiency, and benefits goals. Cliff Planner on the right side of your screen, that is the tool that, as I said, more of a TurboTax. So if you're really going to be sitting down with a family and you have that time to kind of, put in their individual specific family details, maybe you want to budget with that family on their expenses. So it's really for a model of coaching that you have more time with the family or a worker. You can use that Cliff Planner. Okay. So now let's get into the dashboard and how it works. Right? So we're going to use a case study. And because I started out with that Alabama tool, I'm going to use Alabama. It is one of our major partners, the state of Alabama. Let's start out with a case study. 25-year-old single mother, 2 children, ages 2 and 4, lives in Mobile, Alabama. Let's say that this parent is currently working full-time, earning about $9 an hour. Like many families in that situation, she receives public assistance to help make ends meet. So let's say that Leah, this worker, receives food assistance, healthcare assistance, Medicaid for her children, child care assistance, and then some key tax credits, such as the Earned Income Tax Credit, the Child Independent Care Tax Credit, and the Child Tax Credit. So we have a worker, a parent with children, that's currently in a job that does not provide self-sufficiency. Let's just all imagine she's about to walk into a job training center and ask about career opportunities. So two key questions, that we want to keep in mind for Leah. And let's just all put on our career coaching hats. Number 1, does Leah's career choice, so she's going to walk into a career coaching center, does her career choice offer a path to economic self-sufficiency? That's question 1. Question 2, what financial barriers will she face on her career path? And so the financial barriers piece is going to be the benefits piece. The self-sufficiency is what we covered in the first part of today's presentation, and it's why I spent some time on it. Because in our third-party evaluation, talking about self-sufficiency and that living wage with families has been reported as one of the most useful features of this tool. So I'm going to start spending more time talking about self-sufficiency with our partners and how it is actually a very related and complementary discussion to the benefits goals. So let's say Leah walks into that job center. She's talking to a counselor one-on-one. And that counselor says, well, let me talk about a career pathway in healthcare. She presents this career pathway to Leah. Now, you may be familiar with the career pathway model. This is from a very excellent report from what's called the Health Profession and Opportunity Grants Program from the Administration for Children and Families. What this is showing you is that a worker can start out at the top of this chart as a certified nursing assistant, CNA. Entry-level position. However, that typically doesn't pay enough to lead a worker to financial stability. And we're often concerned about moving workers up a career path in the healthcare sector into higher paying jobs. Right, so you could imagine that Leah could go to the left of your screen and get extended CNA trainings, for more education, start earning more money. Or she can go to the right side of your screen and become maybe a nurse, licensed practical nurse or registered nurse. The key idea here is more education leads to a different job and higher pay. What we're going to look at today is this first step on the career path in Alabama. So let's imagine all of us together that Leah is wants to be a certified nursing assistant, but she's thinking about getting that extended CNA training, right? So she wants to get that additional step of training and start earning more as particularly a phlebotomist, right? And you can see phlebotomist is in that gray arrow on your screen as one of the extended CNA trainings available. So now Leah is interested in this phlebotomist and nursing assistant. The question is, well, does my state offer training in this field? So she goes to the Alabama's in-demand occupation list. This is from the state. These are occupations that are determined to be in demand, eligible for federal training dollars. So Leah could get training in these occupations. We see on the left in that red box, both nursing assistant and phlebotomist are on this chart. Right? And this is just a very standard piece of information, labor market information, that shows you the number of jobs that are currently available. And you can see nursing assistant has about 2,800 annual openings. Phlebotomist has about 305. And phlebotomist tends to pay a little bit more. So median annual salary is about $30,000. You can see that on the column median annual salary, whereas nursing assistant is about $24,000 median annual salary. So we can see that, particularly for a family with 2 children, nursing assistant is arguably a job that's not paying enough to have financial security for a family with 2 children. Right, so she's probably going to think really hard about that phlebotomist job. All right. So just to recap, I'm going to go to the tool now. What we have is we're concerned about self-sufficiency and benefits cliffs, because remember, Leah is on public assistance. So what we're going to do is, either from a policymaker perspective, if you're interested in, well, how are we designing these career paths? Number one. Right? If we're interested in talent supply and supporting workers, how are we designing these career paths? How are we choosing what jobs are on our in-demand occupation list that you see now? And then 2, from Leah's perspective, will these occupations get her to self-sufficiency? And then what will the benefits cliffs be? That's what we have to know. So now let me move to our demonstration of the tool. Just a moment, please. All right. All right, everyone. We are now at the homepage of the David dashboards. This is Alabama's customized tool. And we're going to really just use this as though we were a coach for Leah or a policymaker thinking about the design of these healthcare career paths in the state. To begin, notice that the tool has 4 tabs at the top. We have the Welcome tab, we have a Results tab, and we're going to go through that one very closely. We have a For Policymakers tab, and we have a Methodology or Frequently Asked Questions tab. The For Policymakers tab is going to be used to understand, well, what's the net return for the taxpayer of moving up a career pathway? Right? And that's as you can imagine, understanding the net return of career advancements, a very important metric for partners in the business community, for the policymaking community, not necessarily for workers. Workers would be going through the Results tab, and we're going to go through that in just a moment. Let's now focus on the left side of your screen, which is the menu section. All right, so the first piece of information of any customized tool in New Mexico would be the exact same way, is we start out with the geography. Geography is very important in the tool because the tool is customized for both cost of living at the county level public assistance programs at the state level, and wages at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, metropolitan or non-metropolitan level in your state. So wages, public assistance, tax policy, and cost of living are all localized in the tool. So this choosing geography is very important. So remember, of course, Leah lives in Alabama. We have information for every county in the state. So we're going to go to Mobile County because Leah lives in Mobile, Alabama. Step 2, what is the family composition? Family composition is very important because it determines cost of living and public assistance eligibility. So we want to be precise with the information we're adding in on the family type part of this menu. When I expand the menu, you can see here we have a variety of different options, from 1 adult with 0 children, 1 adult with 1 child, 1 adult with 2 children, all the way up to 3 children. And then we have 2 adult households as well. So you could enter 2 adults with 0 to 3 children as well. Leah has 1 adult with 1 child. So we're going to, 2 children. And those children were 2 and 4. And remember, this is the dashboard, when I mentioned it, is more of an Excel or a Tableau style tool. The reason I said that is because this drop-down menu structure you see on your left. It's meant to provide more high-level, kind of case study-like results, to provide you with quick information, either to bring to a policymaker or talk about with a family. Right? To really get down to even more precise information, you have to use the planner. But again, that's going to require more time. Next option here, and this is really important, is public assistance. So we want to type in the public assistance programs that Leah is on. You have 3 options in the tool. You can choose all programs and default to all of the programs in that policy rules database I mentioned before. Sometimes our partners do that, but more often than not, you're going to type in the scenario you're interested in, either in terms of what's most common for public policy or what is the most common for the families you serve as an organization. Right? You want it to be as finely targeted to your target research question or coaching scenario as possible. You can choose no programs. Right? Maybe you're serving families that aren't on public assistance at all, and you just want to do career exploration. You could use the tool just for career exploration, and in fact, many of our partners do. Or you can select a custom list. And that's what we're going to do today. So custom list, let's remember what Leah was on. So Leah was on food assistance, so I'm going to type in the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition and Assistance Program. Leah was receiving the child care subsidy, CCDF program. Leah was receiving children's health insurance. And Leah was receiving the major federal tax credits, the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit, and the child independent care tax credit. And if you aren't familiar with the details of all these programs, don't worry. The rules, of course, are very complex. All that really matters for now is that you understand that we're dealing with a program that is for food assistance, a program that is for child care assistance, a program that is for healthcare assistance for our children, and then common tax credits, right? Earned income tax credit, the child tax credit, and the child independent care tax credit. That's the background information we need. Now we're going to do the career choice component. So in the tool, you have the first thing you'll see is specify target occupation. So remember that career pathway diagram I showed you. Remember that we were trying to encourage Leah to think about this job as a phlebotomist. So we're going to go to select career cluster. Out of all of the career clusters in the tool, we're going to choose health sciences. And we're going to choose the occupation of phlebotomist. Let me just type in phlebotomist. And there we go. You have 3 options for training, because of course training is often required to move a worker into these jobs. Under the training, you have the use typical duration is an option. So you can either default to what the Bureau of Labor Statistics tells us is the national most common training duration for this job. I typically recommend not to use that just because there tends to be a lot of local variation in how long these programs take. So I usually encourage our partners to either enter a custom duration, or potentially if it's a very short-term training program, maybe choose no education or training required. So what I'll do today is I'm gonna enter a custom duration and type in 1 year. And so that depends, approximately 1 year of training. Now we're going to compare the phlebotomist to another occupation. So you can see that the specify occupation for comparison sheet has near minimum wage job as an option. So we could just compare phlebotomist to a hypothetical near minimum wage job. If we did that, we would just be asking, is Leah going to do better in this near minimum wage job than in a near minimum wage job? Right? That's a very simple baseline. But we know Leah is actually interested in that CNA, right? So she's trying to figure out, is it better to go from CNA to phlebotomist? Is that payoff going to be there? So let's take a look. So I'm just going to go to human services now, excuse me, health science. I'm going to choose nursing assistant. And I'll also choose the same duration for training of 1 year. And then click calculate results. So let's just summarize what we have here. Right? So on the menu, all we've done is type in Leah's case study, if you will. We're in Alabama, Mobile County, so we're capturing that local cost of living and those local wages. It's critical that this tool is localized. Leah is an adult, single adult, 2 children, ages 2 and 4. And that family, Leah, like probably many families in her situation, are receiving SNAP, food assistance, CCDF, child care subsidy, Medicaid or the CHIP program for children, the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit, and the child independent care tax credit. And we're comparing phlebotomist to nursing assistant. Let's go to the results tab and see how we now use the tool to understand this career choice. So let's start out with the first chart on the page. And I want to also just preface this by saying the tool is divided up into 2 sections here. We're going to go first through just pure career exploration without any public assistance at all. Because remember, as I said, a lot of our partners use this technology just for career exploration. And then the second half of this page, we're going to introduce the benefits cliff. So let's first talk about job choice and self-sufficiency, and then we're going to talk about the benefits cliff in the second half of this page. Looking at this first chart, income before taxes, all we're doing now is saying, based on what the Bureau of Labor Statistics tells us these jobs pay locally, what is the benefit? Let's take a look. This chart's showing you from 2021 out to 2045, Leah's projected income. You can see this first year when Leah's in school, Leah's in that near minimum wage job as a phlebotomist, making only about $8,400 a year, part-time work. First year as that phlebotomist, that income entry level is going to go up to about $27,000 a year. That's much better than the nursing assistant, which at the starting level, so entry level earnings is about $21,000. You can, if you go left to right here, you can see that both these lines kind of curve over time. Right? That's wage growth. So you can see that over time, that phlebotomist is going to earn more money. So in about 2034, that worker could be making about $35,000 in Mobile, Alabama, which is still much better than the $25,000 that more entry-level nursing assistant would make. All this is showing us right now, and the key takeaway I ask all you to take note of here, is that based on wages, that phlebotomist job is looking much better than the nursing assistant. That's very consistent to that Alabama in-demand jobs list I showed you in the slide there. Phlebotomist is paying more than nursing assistant. Right? So in terms of labor market data, Phlebotomist is looking like an opportune career choice for Leah. Chart number 2, self-sufficiency. Remember, I spent some time talking about self-sufficiency. Here's where it's important. All right. So we have 2 main changes on this chart compared to the one we just did. The first is that now we're showing after-tax income. So in the same red and orange line, this is now how much Leah is earning after we subtract state and federal tax. You can see that phlebotomist is about $22,000, and the nursing assistant about $18,000 after tax. The reason we're showing after tax on this chart is we're now asking that question is, when will Leah earn enough, have enough take-home pay to cover her basic expenses without public assistance? That's not to say that we're not trying to say that the worker needs to always move off public assistance, right? We're just saying that if we want a measure of some measure of financial stability, the self-sufficiency target allows us to say that this is an amount that would allow Leah to cover her basic expenses without the need for public assistance. Okay, so we have after-tax income, and then we have this gray line. This gray line is the self-sufficiency target, or the cost of living in Mobile, Alabama. What it's telling us is that in 2021, Leah would have to earn about $46,000 per year after tax to be able to afford childcare, healthcare, transportation, food, housing, and other miscellaneous expenses. You can see that there's a pretty significant gap between her income as a phlebotomist or a nursing assistant and that cost of living. We tend to call that the self-sufficiency gap. For those of you in the audience that work with maybe United Way and ALICE data, or MIT with their living wage data, it's a very similar pattern. Going left to right, you can see that gray line goes down over time. That's reflecting necessary expenses going down as the worker's children age. So as that child goes from a 2-year-old to a school-age child to ultimately no longer needing childcare, those necessary expenses go down as well. So the bottom line of this chart is what it's telling us is that, well, the phlebotomist is getting that worker closer to the self-sufficiency, and that's progress, and we need to celebrate that. But there is going to probably be some financial stability for this single parent with 2 children because they aren't at that self-sufficiency level. And in fact, based on the wage data, they are likely not to cross that self-sufficiency target at least till 2037. So almost 16 years or 15 years even of wage growth until they're able to cover that self-sufficiency target. So that is a long period of potential financial instability that we need to think about in terms of Leah's situation. Do we need to think about a different career path for Leah? Do we need to provide more support for Leah for childcare or career advancement opportunities early on? Right? That's the kind of conversation this can suggest to have with a worker or for policy. If you click on this blue banner here, it will tell you the expenses that are in that self-sufficiency target. So every bar here for every year is showing you the estimated expenses Leah would have to pay. So you can just see, for example, that in 2021, Leah would have to spend about $15,000 a year on childcare, about $5,700 a year on healthcare, about $6,700 a year on food, about $8,200 a year on housing, about $3,900 a year on transportation, about $4,000 a year on other miscellaneous expenses such as clothing, and then about $2,500 a year on utilities. So that's the component of the self-sufficiency target. And on this chart, you can see that same pattern over time about how it starts out high and then gradually goes down over time. All these charts are interactive. So for example, you wanted to see what this would look like without childcare expenses. You could just click on childcare and those expenses are now gone. So that is one of the benefits of this tool is the interactivity of these charts. You wanted to show this chart without the self-sufficiency target, you could just click on the menu show the worker or your audience some information about, well, here's after-tax income. Now let me go to the next slide and show you how that interacts with the cost of living load. So let's recap. What we've just done is walked through the core components of career exploration. We've talked about wage growth. We've talked about self-sufficiency. So the job looks very good in terms of its wage growth, right? And phlebotomist is looking much better than nursing assistant. So that career path is going to pay off. There are some challenges, I would argue, with this lack of, or this self-sufficiency gap. And we have to think about that from a community partner perspective or from a career planning perspective. Now, what we're going to do is now introduce that key information that I showed you in the slides. And that information is the public assistance that Leah receives. Right, so what we're going to do now is ask, how does that public assistance affect Leah's career path? And that's going to bring us to the benefits. So let's take a look. The first chart on the public assistance section is showing you the public assistance by career choice. On the left side of your screen, you have the public assistance for the nursing assistant. You can see that as a CNA, Leah early on would get about $4,500 a year in children's health insurance, about $15,000 a year in childcare subsidies, about $7,900 a year in food assistance, about $7,200 a year in child tax credit, and about $3,400 a year for earned income tax credit. So it's showing you that components for every year of the public assistance Leah would receive. An advantage of this tool is it's showing you how that changes over time. And so as Leah earns more money, these public assistance dollars are going to change every year. So you can just see how, for example, food assistance every year is going down as Leah earns more money as a senior. On the right side of your screen, you see the phlebotomist. Right away, we can tell that as a phlebotomist, Leah will receive less public assistance. These bars are lower. You see, for example, we look at 2023, this amount, about $20,000 a year estimated value of public assistance, where it's about $26,000 a year as a nursing assistant, estimated value of public. Okay, so what this is suggesting is that the differences in public assistance across these two programs is going to have implications for the payoff to become a phlebotomist. Like just for eyeballing this right now, I can see that as a phlebotomist, Leah is going to lose food assistance in 2023. So notice that dark orange bar is gone in 2023. Right? That's a significant loss of a food assistance program that Leah is going to have to manage. I can see right here that the child care subsidy is about $1,200 in 2024. Well, that is about, let's see, in this year, that is about $2,600, right, in this particular year. And so that is going to show us exactly what is going to be changing here in terms of its child care subsidy, or in the total overall net financial resources. There's differences in program. Earned income tax credit, about $4,100 a year in 2024. It's about $5,500 a year for the nursing assistant. So what's the combined effect of this on the career path? The next image I show you is going to be that summary measure. So what I'm going to do next is show you the disposable income career path for Leah. It's going to show you the actual financial path Leah faces. And this is it. So what this line is showing you is this is not employment income like we saw before. This is what we call annual net financial resources. This is public assistance plus income minus taxes minus expenses. So think about this as what's left over. The effect of the benefits cliff on this career path is significant. But let's just take a look why here. So let's all first notice here in 2023, this red line as a phlebotomist, it's a huge benefits cliff. Remember how we just identified the loss of food assistance in the chart above? Well, that's what's happening right now. Now, the implication of that is notice that from 2023 all the way out to 2031, so that's 8 years, that higher paying phlebotomist is actually worse off than the nursing assistant. In other words, the payoff to moving up the career path is actually a loss. And that is the dramatic consequence of the benefits cliff, even for a family that's actually not on a full complement of public assistance here. This is actually a fairly common profile of public assistance, except for childcare, which admittedly is oftentimes a program that's in limited supply. But this is showing us exactly how benefits cliffs can interact and potentially eliminate the incentive to move up a career pathway in a very common career pathway like what we see here. Just to emphasize that, let me scroll up really quick and show you, compare, remember we started out looking at income alone, right? Phlebotomist, the red line, it looks much better than nursing assistant. And this is unfortunately the way that I myself used to view career advancement, looking at income alone. But the financial reality for Leah as a worker is actually this, right? A much different perspective, I would argue, on how this will actually benefit the worker. And again, and if you put yourself in Leah's shoes, moving up this career pathway did not pay off. You may be wondering, why would this be important to share with a worker? Or would this information discourage a worker from advancement? Well, the first piece of the first thing I would suggest to you when faced with an image like this is that we can't hide from the problem. And we can't not share this information with the worker. A good way to think about it as well as one of our partners in their service delivery model with families, the last element of it is trust and loyalty. They measure and they prioritize that after workers are served by their organization, they go through job training, they're served, that they had enough satisfaction that they would refer family and friends and they would to that organization, and they themselves would come back. I would suggest that if workers are moved up a career path and then face a negative outcome like what we see here, without being told about it in advance so they could plan for it, we're less likely to develop that trust. Right? We want people to be able to prepare. We don't want people taken by surprise. And at the same time, we want to think about as service delivery organizations, as policymakers, what can be done to fix situations like what we've seen this week. One additional piece of information here that may be of use to some of the partners on the call today is just understanding in your area, what are the eligibility thresholds for these programs? So let's just hypothetically say that one of our partners in Alabama just came and said, can you tell me what amount of money someone would lose food assistance at in the state? When will they lose food assistance? When will they lose child care? Just what is that dollar amount? This tool here, public assistance by employment income, will show you that value. So the chart's a little bit different here. You can see income is on the bottom, goes from 0 to over 100,000 a year. And then the estimated public assistance is from, just on the vertical axis from 0 to 40,000. So let's just say someone asked you, well, when will I lose food assistance? What dollar amount? We can just take a look here and undo these other programs and say, well, you'll lose food assistance. I'll just look here at this chart. I can see the last dollar amount that the worker gets, it's at 28,000 a year. So we can just tell the worker you're going to lose the dollar threshold for losing food assistance is just about $29,000. That's when the program totally is eliminated. Again, and this is not necessarily something you may show a worker unless they ask, but this can give you a high level view on just what is the eligibility for this program. So for childcare, likewise, we can see that childcare would be lost with a family at just above $36,000. So that is the career expiration part of the dashboard. Remember, this is customized for our partners, so it has the occupations you need, specialized programs that you potentially would need. Maybe there's like a local housing program that you need programmed in. We want this to work for what our partners are going to use it for. Right? So we really try as hard as we can to make this tool functional and usable for whatever your use case is. Now, lastly, what we're going to do is go through the For Policymakers tab. Now, remember, this is not certainly not for showing this information to families or workers. What this is for is if you're giving a presentation to stakeholders in the policy community, the business community, maybe community organizations, you want to know what is the return if we move a worker from a nursing assistant to phlebotomist, from a taxpayer perspective. The way we're able to do that is, remember early on I mentioned that fundamentally this tool is built on a proprietary tool built by the public sector, and it's really a tax planner. So underneath the hood here, if you will, is a tax calculator. So we can fairly easily calculate the federal and state income tax, the FICA tax, payroll tax that workers will be paying. So we can estimate tax revenue. And at the same time, we can calculate, well, how much will the public save as workers use fewer public assistance programs? So let's take a look here. Again, we have the familiar orange line and the red line. Orange line, nursing assistant, red line, phlebotomist. And we're just looking at the total taxes paid. And we can see that clearly that the taxes paid for a phlebotomist, because they earn more, are paying more in taxes. Right? That's very clear here in this first chart. Now, the next chart is the taxpayer savings to career advancement. And this is the main summary chart. All we do here is we add up the total tax revenue and we add up the public assistance savings. Remember how we talked about earlier on that because that phlebotomist is earning more, they're receiving fewer public assistance. So what does the taxpayer save from that career advancement step? The best way to look at this is if everyone just focuses on the lifetime chart, the lifetime bar on the far right of your screen. That lifetime bar here is showing us that over the lifetime, if Leah goes from nursing assistant to phlebotomist, the taxpayer will save over $94,000 in terms of increased tax revenue and public assistance savings. Right, so from just one worker going from nursing assistant to phlebotomist, the taxpayer can save over almost $100,000. And you can imagine if you have a program with 10, 20, or 100 workers moving into phlebotomy or a similar occupation, the taxpayer savings add up to considerable amounts. So to put it together, right, I often like to conclude by saying we can see very clearly that the gains to the taxpayer are very clear to move up the career pathway. But what we also saw was that the worker's perspective, from Leah's perspective in terms of what she would gain, there were some significant short-term gains. Right, so it's a lot of the discussion that seems fruitful is how can we align those two stories, right? Like the gain for the taxpayer stays there, but how can we make that return to the worker really pay off in the short term so that workers are able to mitigate those benefits cliffs, that loss of SNAP, those gradual reductions in childcare and the earned income tax credit, so that the worker has the payoff too. So that's the tour through the tool. As I said, we also do have this planner version, which we're not going to go through today. But this, what you see on your screen right now is the planner that we would make available to our partners that really just want to customize further all the information that we just went through. You know, entering specific wages, entering a budget, you would use this click planner version of the tool. And I'll be happy to actually answer questions about that later. But in summary, you know, this tour of the dashboard we just took hopefully gives you a sense more in depth on how we would train users on how to use this tool, and then some of the capability it can provide to really get a sense for any career path, any occupational career comparison. Where are the financial barriers, and what is that path of the worker to self-sufficiency? Right? Those are the two main use cases that I've seen from our partners, and that I really think this tool can give you information that's very hard to find in other places. Thank you very much for your attention in this time period, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Alex. We're a few minutes ahead of schedule, which is great. I'll just remind folks, please put your questions and your comments in the Q&A. I'll note, Alex, while Alex was talking, we had a couple of folks drop in to say that Ticket to Work and also USDA SNAP does require design or pathways to self-sufficiency too by law. So put your comments and things like that in the chat box and the Q&A section, and we'll get to those all at the end. We'll move now to the program where Stephen Shepelwich of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City and Carla Davis will talk to us about how they're actually using Cliff in Oklahoma.
Great, thank you, Adrian. It's great to be here, be a part of this conversation about how the dashboard can be of use in New Mexico. And I really appreciated that Alex started his conversation off by showing the connection between the dashboard and how it addresses the benefits cliffs with this issue of job quality. And I know that job quality is so important, and it's the area that the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, where I work, started its work around workforce development a number of years ago. And we grounded that work with Adrian Smith and the coalition there in New Mexico to really learn what are some of these issues that are affecting direct caregivers in the state, a job that is so important and too often undervalued and underappreciated. And through working with Adrian on that topic, we looked at a number of issues around work quality, including this idea of career ladders. How do we move individuals to more self-sufficient jobs? And an implicit in all of that work was benefits cliffs, recognizing that people will hit those benefits cliffs. But 6 or 7 years ago, when we were knee deep in that work, Adrian and I didn't have the tools to sufficiently address the question. And I think that is where so many other folks are. I'm sure many of you on this call today are in that same boat, knowing that your clients, the people that you care about, are facing this benefits cliffs. They know it, but we don't have real tools to be able to make changes, either in practice, in the information we provide, in the decisions that consumers, clients are making, or in the policies and structures that put them in place. That's why I was so excited to learn of this work that Alex is leading about 1.5 years ago. And as soon as I heard about it, called Alex up, we started talking. And through that work, have been able to see how we can take that and expand it into different use cases across our district here in the Kansas City Fed in particular. And one of those areas we've been working is in Oklahoma. We have a memorandum of understanding, a partnership with the Oklahoma Office of Workforce Development, in which we selected 3 local partners to really use this tool and try it out in new and different ways. We have one group that is in a rural area using it as part of an assessment tool, an education tool for youth in their local youth build program. We have a workforce board that is using the dashboard to look at different jobs that they are promoting to ensure that those jobs are leading to self-sufficiency. So really helping to evaluate the types of options that they prioritize and present to their clients. And then also, as you'll hear, working with Goodwill Tulsa on using it in a couple of different ways. And Carla Davis, the Vice President of Administration at Goodwill Tulsa, will be talking about how they're using that both in-house with clients in their workforce training, and then also in the field with their financial empowerment centers. So through this, we're really seeing that there are so many different ways it can be used. And every time that we start talking about benefits cliffs with different sets of folks engaged in this work, social service work, new ideas pop up. And it's exciting to see how the tool is being expanded. And Alex mentioned the employer tool. That's going to be pivotal in terms of working with employers to see what their pay structures and benefit structures look like. And then also expanding the numbers and types of benefits that are included so that we can look at services for people with disabilities as well as veterans. And one we're starting to explore is benefits through tribal governments, other benefit regimes that fit into this that will only make this tool more applicable. So I say all that as preface just to say that, this work is grounded in the field. It is taking off in many different ways. And Alex and I are excited to see all the different ways that can be put to use and learn from you in New Mexico as you start to work with it. In Oklahoma, we have a monthly meeting of the organizations that are using it. And in that meeting, new ideas always come up and share new lessons and new opportunities to expand on that. And we have no doubt that if a core group of folks in New Mexico start doing the same, it will only make a difference in New Mexico as well as the country as a whole as we expand this work. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Carla to hear kind of a practical view from the field on how this is working in her organization and potential she sees. Carla?
All right, thank you. So let me queue up my slides here. Sorry, I'm not one who can talk and drive at the same time. So let there be slides. All right, so thank you very much. Pleasure to be with everyone here today. The way we use this here at Goodwill, I think, is easiest to talk about just as part of the demonstration. So I know that you have heard, because I have heard, clients say that they can't take another job or they can't take a pay raise, they can't afford it because they may lose their benefits. Well, one of the power, I think, behind this CLIF tool is that you can show whether that's a real fear or based in fact, or just a fear. So we can help clients deal with the reality using the benefits CLIF that we have presented here today. So let me just get going. So I'm going to do this with a real client. Her name is Taylor. Taylor is a single parent of 2 small children. She lives in the Tulsa area. She works in one of the suburban areas around Tulsa as a CNA. She's worked there for several years, actually, and throughout the pandemic. She recently got a raise, which did cause her to lose her childcare benefits. She was planning to go to school at TCC, that's Tulsa Community College, to become an occupational therapy assistant. In Oklahoma, the occupational therapy assistant earns $55,000 a year. She lives in Tulsa County. As part of the benefits that we offer to Tulsa County residents is that with a combination of various kinds, she actually can go to TCC without any cost to her after they apply all the various scholarship things. So but that whole arrangement is threatened because Taylor's childcare costs are higher than the raise that she got because she works with the COVID patients at her nursing home. So, it's one step forward, 2 steps back, and she's she has to decide if she can make this work. And she's pretty frustrated. So this is the chart that Alex just went through, income before taxes. She is already a CNA, so there's no training for her as to be a CNA. That's her current job. This occupational therapy assistant has a 2-year training, and that's represented there by the lower income. She's going to be working part-time as a CNA and full-time as a mommy while she makes room for school. Then, and let me back up to say that this part would be all addressed by our career counselors here at Goodwill. The identifying we do several tests here, TABE and others, that identify the interests and aptitudes and backgrounds that would make someone better suited for one job or another. So they do all of that career exploration as a part of the career counseling. So assume that she's already done that. So then we get to this, and our career counselors talk about this graph with her. And they also would talk about this graph with Taylor. This graph shows that adds that self-sufficiency target, as well as reducing to take-home pay, so disposable income. And you would think that at this point, the career counselors would go, yippee skippy, we just have this occupational therapy, we'll get going on that, and things will be rosy, because you can see that the occupational therapy assistant at the time of graduation makes almost exactly the self-sufficiency target, and she just moves up from there. So this is not even as scary maybe as the example that Alex had, because once she finishes her training, then life is pretty golden. But here's the problem. It's these early years here where her pay as an occupational therapy assistant is well below the CNA pay and well below the self-sufficiency target. And so this is where our Financial Empowerment Center, our financial counselors, actually come in. And this is this set of charts is out of the other tool that we didn't spend any particular time on as part of the demo, but this is the financing part of paying for her education. So you can see that in the first 2 years in that top chart, she is below zero. So zero would be break even. She's needs about $5,000 in the first year and almost $20,000 in the second year. And after that, then she gets the job with the as an occupational therapy assistant, and she moves on. The first 2 years, this is the income chart. You can see that it is the loss of public benefits in the second year that really hurts. And you may wonder, so these two take-home pay amounts, so she's making the same amount. Well, the difference is over here in the benefits. And that's what causes her to be so far down in the second year. I mean, she can't make it in the first year, and then she loses those benefits. What she's actually losing here are some actual benefits, but the dramatic loss there is because she has available some additional COVID benefits in this era. So she has losses in SNAP, the Child Independent Care Credit, and the Child Tax Credits. And all of those programs had some extra heft in them in 2021 that will expire in 2022. So she has a gap of the $5,000 in the first year, and without really changing anything on her part, it goes to about $20,000 in the second year. And this is what Taylor and other clients that we all have are. That's what's behind the question. So how can I even get ahead? And the answer is it's really tough. These are the two graphs that Alex showed before. So the assistant here and this says radiology, but other technologies is this side over here. And that's the occupational therapy assistant. And you can tell in this one, so there's a lot more color here in the medical assistance graph and not so much over here. So even without knowing that the different bars are the EITC and the child tax credit and the child independent care, even without knowing what those mean, you would know that you and she would really want to be in this graph on the right. And this is what our financial empowerment team can help work on. They can help her to create a budget. They can help her to access additional benefits that she may not already know of, or there may be other opportunities for assistance that aren't part of the traditional public assistance, but there may be additional assistance available from a local nonprofit or some other local support. That's how the two pieces work together for us. So the basic information on choice of careers and what matters to the individual client. So what their background, what their aspirations are, that's all handled again by the career counselor team. When we get into talking about money, then that's addressed by our Financial Empowerment Center team. And they work together at the same time while the client is progressing through training to make sure that they can make that transition from the public benefits that they have been accustomed to as a CNA and the choices that are common that you have to make when you're working in that area. And then the additional choices that you would make on your own because you're not still eligible for benefits. So this tool and the next, this chart and the next are ones that I also used to talk to the interim study. So we had some lawmakers at the state level who had a hearing just this past week before on just kind of the overall disincentive that exists for people who are trying to do better. So this looks great. Taxes paid more, of course, but she will never get to this point if she can't figure out these 2 years. Won't happen. So this chart shows the total taxes. We talked about that briefly, including the FICA tax, federal income tax, and state income tax. Doesn't include sales tax. And so you can begin to see here the gains to taxpayers as a whole for this move. And then we did see this chart. This talks about how the career advancement affects both federal and state budgets, increasing taxes and reducing benefits. So again, this early on, this reflects the losses, the additional benefits that would be required in those first early years of her training. But even, and that's years 1 and 2 actually. So already year 3 would have been positive if we showed them as individual years. Here in the middle years, you can tell that it's still a huge benefit, and almost 179,000 over a lifetime. And as Alex said, assume that this person is multiplied, 10 times or 100 times. Even then we begin to, even with just one person, you can see that it matters a lot, and just add zeros. Oh wait, so the key here is to develop a way to make sure that she can get over the training hump and into this new career, which will make these, if it's state funding, it will make this loss larger in the early years. But I would argue that an investment of 25,000, 5,000 in the first year and 20 in the second would be pretty worth it if you're talking about, 175,000 over the lifetime of a worker. So I guess what I wanted to show in this kind of series is not only how we break it up here so that our career counselors are only talking about the career information that they are most comfortable delivering, and our financial counselors are talking about the financial stuff that they're accustomed to dealing with. When we were first talking about this to the individual groups, and we talked about this collaboration between the two programs, the financial team was like, well, what do I have to tell them that they're not really suited for this kind of work? Or I said, that's you're going to be talking about the financial aspects of making this work. The career counselors are going to be already talking about the career choices and the implications of those choices. So, and then of course, with the policy information, then you're well prepared to talk to anybody about that additional investment, of $25,000 to produce the lifetime gains, not only to the state, but to the taxpayer and her family, her children, who will, experience the power of a working mom that's not reliant on the benefits that the CNA mom would have been. So so now I get to this slide. The Cliff dashboard tool for Oklahoma will look different than the one for Alabama, because the tool, of course, is customized to what's available in the state. In Oklahoma, we just expanded Medicaid so that it covers adults. And that's baked into our tool for Oklahoma as well. The dashboard, the planner, and then my contact information. We will answer questions from everybody here at the end, but in case you think of something later, I'd be glad to talk about how we do things here. And with that, I will stop and hand it back.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you very much. So there are a couple ways. We have a segment here for Q&A. a couple ways for you all to do it. You can put your questions directly in the Q&A. It's also easy. We have a person here on the phone, so if you would like, raise your hand and we'll take you off mute and allow you to answer your question that way. And Carla, that's so interesting the way you put this, you know, just the last few things that you said. No one person can ever know everything. I mean, a lot of times we're so specialized. Can you talk a little bit more about, you know, what it took within your organization to get people to come along, get your staff to come along? I mean, there must have been some period of transition where you had to adapt as an organization to use the tool.
Absolutely so. It helps that we are two parts of the same organization. So the Tulsa Works team that does the initial meetings with the clients, they work in our same building, so no Zoom required. We just talk to each other. But you're right, it does take some willingness to share. Because even in an organization where we all are working together, we do tend to get a little bit territorial about my clients and your clients. And it did take us a little bit to remember that really we're out here to do the best we can for our clients, and to share that. There is also a little bit of learning to work together. So we felt like the team early on wanted to stake out really bright lines. So this team is going to do this part, and then we're going to do this part. But in practice, it's not quite that bright line. And the counselors do have to talk to each other. The career counselors talks to the financial counselors. And we are set up so that we could both be talking to the client at the same time. So that's although we actually haven't done that yet, it's possible, and we talked about that. And I would say that probably the most important thing was to do the internal training together. So we had both the career counselors and the financial counselors together. We talked about how this was going to work for us and gave them a chance to role play with each other and try to stump the chumps. So so they really could see that it would work.
Good, thank you. Alex, as we think about this, I mean, I know I'm excited and our organization is excited about getting Cliff to New Mexico and helping to bring that to our state. What are the components that are a have to from your perspective, you know, that make this work in a state, that make it work so that Alex Reuter and his boss say, okay, let's go to New Mexico? What's required?
The first thing we would want to look at is what are the intended use cases of the tool, and who are the partners that want to use the tool, right? And the reason that's important is because, you know, as I covered in my slides, there's different ways to use this tool, right? There's coaching, there's policy analysis, there's community engagement on the issues, right? So I would say first we have to understand, like, how would we measure success, and that depends on the use case. So the first step of bringing it to Mexico is, you know, what organizations want to be at the table to use this tool? How do they see wanting to use either the dashboard, the planner, maybe the Cliff Employer tool, right? And then we just write out what those use cases and what those objectives are. We then provide the tools, and then to me, success would be we're tracking those use cases and making sure that you all have what you need to be effective at your goals, either from coaching, from policy, from community advocacy. That's how I would measure success. So it's really about bringing the partners together initially that want to use this tool in some way, understanding what those use cases are, then making sure we provide you that so you can achieve those objectives.
And is there a cost for bringing it to a state each time you work with state this has got to take up a lot of time and resources from your end.
Mhm. There's no financial cost. The only cost of using the tool is going through the exercise that I just mentioned, right? And we usually do that in the form of an MOU with partners. And so what that cost is really just the time it takes before implementation to really be intentional and describing how you plan to use this, what your objectives are, and then how we could measure success. Right? So what we want to do is have an MOU that outlines those things. What we cannot do is just kind of provide this tool and put it on the internet and hope it's used. Right? We really want a partnership with you, so we're understanding exactly how it's going to be used, how we can measure success, and then we can then provide you with a customized tool that can help you do that.
Thank you. I'm looking for others, either raised hands or questions in the Q&A. While those come in, Alex, just another question for you. As we read about people who maybe have left the field, well, in our case, I wonder if there aren't caregivers who've permanently decided to become truck drivers, as an example, here in New Mexico. How can this tool be used to bring people back into the workforce? What have you seen in the states that you have been working with?
Bringing them back mean that perhaps they're currently just not working at all?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
It's an interesting question. I think the answer would really be just pulling from models of career coaching and guidance, right? And thinking about what experts in those fields would do. I do believe that the benefit to being in the labor force for those that can or are willing and able to work exceeds that of not working. And I think that what the tool can show you is that the benefits to being in the workforce in specific jobs are going to be significant for you, right? Short-term and long-term. So what I would suggest is that the tool would be used to complement maybe strategies you currently have to talk about entering the labor force. And particularly trying to find the set of jobs that offers what looks like the financial incentive that is good enough to get you to come back into it. Right? So that probably means being a little more selective about what jobs you want to coach that family with the tool in order to give them that motivation they would need to re-enter the workforce.
That's good. I really love how Stephen Cheplewich talked a little bit about a bit ago about how the tool can be adapted for use with veterans, persons with disabilities, obviously, tribal governments here in New Mexico in particular, not to mention just the obvious uses with young people and older workers in particular. I could see how aging and long-term services departments would be interested. Good.
And I think, Adrian, to build on that, Alex and his team really built this as a tool for career coaching and career counseling. And it really has that perspective. And I'd say this is one of the first times that, benefits cliffs has been addressed in some ways from that perspective of career counseling and career coaching. And I think that there's just tremendous value, as we saw with Carla's work, of tying it into the financial education side as well, and that financial coaching. Just in and of itself, that tool I could see being used by straight out financial educators in a lot of different settings. And I just think that marriage is really interesting. And New Mexico, given its history with leading around financial coaching, different places there, and given the work with individual development accounts, given the work in just a number of different places we could think of in New Mexico, I think this could really be an interesting tool to bring different sectors together. The workforce side, the financial education side, the social service side, that are all too often kind of in their own silos. It's really a way to bring folks together to say, okay, how do we work with these individuals holistically? I'm really excited about that.
Good. And we do have that diversity of audience on this webinar today. So you're absolutely right. And I know they're hearing their part. So the folks from United Business Bank and the FDIC and Encuentro, folks like that, who I think will be with us long term in a partnership to build it for New Mexico, are all on today. Good.
I'd add one thing about that, and
Hmm.
that is that it also gives your financial counselors an opportunity to talk to the client about the timing of going back to school. So maybe it would be better for our young mom, Taylor, to wait until she has her youngest child in school, so that she had a little more time where she could either work more or shorten the time that it takes for her to go through the program. So that's an interesting additional feature.
That's a really good point. And I really like, Carla, how you put it really in perspective about, at the policy level, boy, those first 2 years, people have to make some hard and tough decisions. And just, you put that right out there for us to understand the reality of a person, what a person's life is going to be and how their life is going to be affected. And that's utmost. As we move on here, Stephen McCall is going to say a few things about directions, the directions that we could take. We do have a few folks here from different states, and we are working with Stephen McCall in particular, but with his organization more broadly, PHI. And I'm just happy to have you join us today, Stephen. Please go right ahead.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you so much. Let me start just by introducing you to who we are as an organization, what brings us to this call. For those of you who aren't familiar with PHI, we're a nonprofit research and consulting firm that aims to improve the quality of long-term care by improving the quality of jobs for direct care workers, which includes personal care aides, home health aides, and the nursing assistants that we heard about today throughout the presentations. A couple of years ago, we embarked on a new multi-state advocacy initiative in recognition that our organization, with its research capacity and advocacy capacity, was uniquely positioned to help advocates on the ground, coalitions on the ground in states, build their own capacity to improve their efficacy in impacting the lives of direct care workers. As part of this initiative, we took basically a 3-3-3 approach. It's a 3-year initiative. We're now in our 2nd year. We've partnered with 3 states and 3 coalitions in those states. So New Mexico Caregivers Coalition is one of them, but we also have partners in Michigan and North Carolina. And the third 3 refers to the policy areas we're working on. Our overarching goals with this initiative are to lift workers out of poverty, fund workforce innovations, and improve data to strengthen the workforce. We began having conversations with both Steve and Alex near the beginning of this initiative, and it became really clear that the benefits cliffs tools that the Fed has developed have cross-cutting implications across all of those policy areas. But we really see this as primarily useful in 2 specific cases, 2 specific use cases. First, the tool can help current and prospective direct care workers map out their careers in healthcare and social services. So there may be opportunities to leverage the tool as a recruitment tool, right? So for folks who are transitioning, for example, out of a minimum wage job, you can start charting a career pathway in healthcare and social services with realistic expectations about what they may experience in terms of their financial well-being. And while some direct care workers would prefer to spend their careers in these jobs, in direct care jobs, others might want to advance into other healthcare professions. So this could be a tool to help those folks improve their financial well-being while also still meeting a need for critical healthcare occupations in other areas. But second, and I think really critically for this workforce, the tool gives us a more complete picture of how policy changes impact direct care workers' compensation. In some cases, well-intentioned policies can actually have a detrimental impact. For example, pass-throughs that increase wages just enough to send a direct care worker over a benefits cliff. The data in the tool underline that we both need to go further on direct care workers' wages and improve their financial stability, but we also need to reform our social safety net to help smooth out those steep cliffs that workers are facing, for example, around childcare subsidies or Medicaid. I think that really came to life for us in Carla's presentation. She talked about a real certified nursing assistant who was working in a nursing home, received supplemental hazard pay for working during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was just enough to send her over a benefits cliff around her childcare subsidies. We really need to make sure that we're addressing these policy challenges in tandem with compensation, that we should be thinking about compensation policy and social safety net policies hand in hand. The two are inextricably linked. And as Alex made clear during his presentation, that holistic picture of a worker's financial well-being is really essential to thinking about the quality of their lives, the quality of their jobs, and at the end of the day, the quality of their services, the services that consumers are receiving. So we're really thrilled to bring this tool to New Mexico as a starting point, to explore the possibilities and making it available elsewhere, and to get a better handle on what's actually happening in the lives of these workers in New Mexico and what policy interventions might be needed. I'm excited to use it to sort of map those interventions, to make the argument for policymakers that these are good investments in their wages. So thank you all for attending and for your interest in this tool. But thanks especially to Alex and Steve and Carla for sharing all of that really helpful information today. I know I learned a lot, so I really appreciate it. Thanks. I'll send it back to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Stephen. So I should mention that as a result of our work with PHI, it has been since about February where we first got a brief presentation. February 21, 2021, our steering committee, Essential Jobs, Essential Care here in New Mexico, has been really interested in this, and we've recommended this at a statewide level. And there are several folks on today's webinar who are continue to be part of that steering committee. And I'm just going to presume that you all are going to keep on going and help us build this tool here for the state. And you all do such different things. We're not, it's made up not only of organizations like ours that advocate for or train caregivers, but in several other organizations. And I do know that there are benefits navigators who really want to be involved, and the disability rights, some advocates from Disability Rights New Mexico that would like to be involved in building it here. So I think what we'll do as a next step, thank you, Maite, count on encuentro, I appreciate that. I think what we'll do as a next step is get reconnected with Alex Reuter and get a process started for building an MOU here for New Mexico, while we at our state level talk about some use cases. So I think you all heard that that's a really important step that we have to first be really clear about with our partners who want to help build it, is how will we use it? How will we be involved? And I'd like to say that, for those of you who are especially interested, think about the kind of commitment that you might make, I don't know, 4 hours, 5 hours a month over the course of a year. How can you help advise the building of this, the building of the tool here for New Mexico? So with that, I'm just continue to look for questions in the Q&A, and I don't want to keep anyone longer than you need to. We will this has been recorded. This has been recorded, and we will send the video out so you can share that with people in your networks. And we'll follow up also with an email along with that, the link to that video. And I do thank all of you for coming today. Thank you very much to Stephen McCall, to Carla Davis, to Steve Sheppelwich, and to Alex Reuter. And we very much appreciate starting out our Monday this way. Take care.